Let's get that shaft seal changed. That's on the back of the input shaft, the one that the power shaft goes through and keeps oil from walking up to the clutch. If it does fail on you, that's definitely a spot where if you're getting hydraulic, rear end oil. If you're getting that up in your clutch area, definitely a possibility. 50 series tractors didn't even have a seal there for the most part. I think the 2050s and 2150s did. But with this pump drive here, and it's getting pressurized lube into it, so it's going to come out through that bearing and get flung around. So there's going to be a lot more oil here on a 55 series large frame than there would be on, say, a 1750 or 1850. But yeah, the shaft went through there, and that was why they added the breather to the PTO unit. The 50 series did not have that breather back there at the PTO unit, because that little bit of gap wasn't, and coming out here was your transmission breather. There at the chain coupler, basically. So the addition of this seal took away their breather point. They added it onto the PTO unit. If for some reason yours is leaking, you don't have to hopefully tear it down. I have not tried this method, but others have. Is you pull the hydraulic pump and then the hydraulic pump drive, and it's right there. You can even reach in and grab it. And even though it looks like it's a two-piece nut, I think it's one. Let's find out. I'm not remembering. But yeah, you get your socket in there. Let's find out how many pieces that nut is first. I can just put it in 2 gears at once, and that'll keep the shaft from turning. Because I have the cover off, imagine you can put it in 1 gear, set the parking brake, chock the wheels, and then the shaft shouldn't turn. It'll turn one way against the sprag clutch if your engine's still in. The other way when you're tightening it, the engine should hold it from turning. Let's see if this crescent wrench even opens up far enough. I'm not sure I can get a ratchet in there. The ratchet yes, the poor man's ratchet. It opens far enough. They weren't so bad. They're both turning. So I think it is all one nut. So look up and see what the book says about torquing it down. Come on, stay light. There is an O-ring right there. I probably should replace that too, because that can definitely cause trouble. Here's the nut in question. Probably wasn't as tight as it should have been. Yeah, let's get that seal changed. And I'll have to figure out what I'm going to do about that O-ring. I mean, replace it, duh, but I got to find one. Didn't think about that part. I knew there was one in there. Oh, there's just the tiniest bit of rubber left in there. Kind of surprised they weren't having... The clutch didn't look oily when I took it out. Could be the rubber finally gave up when I pulled the power shaft. Generally it'll sling out. Let's turn this so you can see what the heck I'm doing. Generally that oil will sling out once it gets to the chain coupler and make a mess there, not go all the way up to the clutch, but it can keep going. Either way, it's not good. There's remains. I'll get this baby cleaned up so we can put a new one in. Yeah, there's what's left of the O-ring. It's kind of takes on its own new shape once it's in there. All that heat and years of, oh yeah, it's kind of brittle. I'm glad I'm replacing that. The replacement is 1/8 inch cross section, 1 3/8 inside diameter. I'm gonna clean that up a little more before I stick it on there. The book actually calls for putting the bearing on and then, or I'm sorry, putting the O-ring on first and then sliding the bearing over it. But it's sticking out enough, at least on this one. That's part of why it's so mutilated, is as that nut comes down, maybe you can make out, I can, the threads and everything, it squishes her down, but that should make a seal. But I don't see how that would go under that bearing. Maybe I'm reading the book wrong. Well, that's in there. But I was thinking crazy thoughts. Here's the old seal minus the rubber seal part. About driving this in, because there's room to drive that down. And then it kind of act like a shield to help keep the PTO shaft centered up somewhat. So it doesn't, the support of the hydraulic drive and the PTO unit should guide it in where it needs to go, but I don't see where this is going to hurt any. There's room to drive that down in more. Oops. Well, I don't ruin it. And maybe it's too distorted to stay in there anymore. Oh yeah, that's in there good. I like that. We're gonna go with it. They say to index the shaft, basically lock it in 2 gears. If you're doing it from out there, maybe, however you chalk it, but keep track where that slot is, because that's why they cut down between the two, what looks like 2 nuts, is to make it thinner so you can hit it with a prick punch or something and stake it down. Let's see, it's hit there. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get my socket in there. It says 190 to 100 foot-pounds of torque, but we might just have to go with tight if the other drive gear wasn't in there. But I'm not looking for extra work. That just turns nice and smooth and no play. Someone staked the heck out of that drive gear for the trans pump. Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, that socket ain't gonna fit in there. We're just gonna have to give her the old crescent wrench torque. Tighten it until it feels like 100 foot-pounds. I don't think I can see in there good enough to see what's going on with the O-ring. Battery's dying on the light. I put some grease on it, but it's gonna get smushed. But that should make it seal. Isn't that what O-rings do, is smush and seal? Does that feel like 100? hopefully staked there, hit her pretty hard. Probably should have put some Loctite on the threads. But that O-ring's in there. That should jam things up too. Well, now that that's back in, and after looking in the book, early 1755s, 18s, 1955s did not have that seal nut on it. And I'm guessing there's, a reason they came up with it. All the 2255s did. So if you don't find that seal in there for some reason, it's not, well, it didn't come with it from the factory. Wouldn't be a bad idea to find one of those nuts and put a seal in there while you're in there, just to prevent any oil from walking on up to the chain coupler or the clutch. Let's change the front seal. Oh, yeah, it's in 2 gears. There's just a little bit of in play here. So while we got that off, we will take a couple of shims out, or however many it takes. Now, taking this out is pretty straightforward. Take the 3 bolts off, slide the cap out. There's my shim stack, and the seal is in there. Oh, I'm glad I'm changing that. It didn't look like it was leaking, but boy, the lips ground down pretty good. It was time. I've got this cleaned up. A little bit of mineral spirits yet to dry off. Before I put the seal in, I'm going to adjust these shims just so I don't have to keep running that seal on and off. But since I didn't think to set up the dial indicator before and see how much end play it already had, I don't know how many to take out. So I'm going to do, it had a fair amount, but now that the thing's out, the cover is out, this outer race. So what happens is as you take shims out, this pushes in farther on this outer race, which then sandwiches the bearings together tighter. So I'm going to start with some thin ones and see how that goes and adjust from there. There's a notch on the back side here, and that goes towards the top because on the back side here's a little trough that catches oil that's flying around. And that goes right down in there to that front bearing. And that little notch lets it fall down in there. So it's important. We call this the hunt and peck method. Whereas if I'd actually taken a measurement, I would know how loose it is and how many shims to take out to get it to where it should be. But that requires math. And, well, I do have a phone that's got a calculator in it. I didn't figure that was going to be enough, but it's a start. Better than it was, but still needs some more out. So we go the other way. And I probably still should have gotten the dial indicator out. Then I have to move it out of the way each time. There's a couple of thinner shims here. Now let's try that whole stack. I mean, not the whole stack, but that stack that came off. There's still shims in there. That feels good, but it ain't tight yet. I might have taken out one too many. Oh yeah, that got tighter. It's a little too much. We don't want tight. We just don't want loose. Now the issue is, ain't a big deal for me because I've got the cover off, is you kind of need to tap the shaft from the back end to loosen the bearing back up, or try to give it a little pull there. Otherwise it's gonna probably stay right where it was at, too tight, even if you put shims back in. Pretty sure these bolts are indexed anyways, that's where there's only one way it'll go on. That way you make sure you get that lined up. Oh yeah, that loosened it back up. Well, that was easy enough. All right, it was tightening it up pretty quick. Let's put in 2 thin ones and try it again. Ooh, just ever so slight. I think we might have hit it. I still got to torque these down a little bit. Well, I'm liking that. That should be, you know, have everything compressed the way it should be. Turns very nice and smooth. I'm not getting any end play. Guess I better see what the book calls for end play. I could throw one more. This one's pretty darn thin. There's different combinations of thicknesses. So you could like substitute a medium one and a thin one. They're not exactly the same amount, or like a thin and a medium, I don't believe, equal a thick one. And that way you can do different combinations to get, you know, your however many thousandths you need. It lists what the thicknesses are in the parts book. The book says 1/1000th of an inch end play, which I'm not feeling any movement, and 5 pounds of inch pounds of drag, or rotational force once it's rolling. Not to get it rolling, but to keep it rolling. So I'm going to, this is the last bolt, let that off and see if it turns easier once the pressure is off the bearing. Let's see, where'd my screwdriver go? Give it a little. Yeah, it feels like I don't have the adapter tool, or if I do, it's hidden somewhere. But it goes in the side, inside the shaft, so you can put a inch-pound wrench on it to see how much force it's taken to turn it. Now I can feel a little end play, but the force to turn it seems about the same. Shim thicknesses are 4 thousandths, 7 thousandths, and basically 15 thousandths. And I got one of each here. I don't want to add 4 back in. Since it doesn't get any harder when I tighten it down, I think it's good. You get it too tight and it puts more load on the bearings and it's going to make a lot of heat and then they could fail. So you don't want that. So let's see. Math. I mean, it's barely moving there, but I did loosen up the cap. 4 thousandths would be too much. Probably need to like add 1/1000th. If I add in this 15 and take out 2 7s, that would make it 1/1000th thicker than it was before. That sounds right. All right, we'll try it. double check, make sure this is a 4. Oh, this is a 7. Doop, doop, doop. Those are the outs. Oh, there's the paper thin one. What? There we go. Must have been a chunk of dirt in there. Yeah, that one's 4. 15. The 2 I took out were 7s. So we're going to put those with takeouts. Put the 15 back on and try it. I like it. Oh, back in here I can just see ever such slight movement in the rollers. Turns free. Doesn't wiggle. Maybe just like I say, just a skosh, which probably still under 1,000, but I'm going to call it a good. So now I just got to get that back out and put the seal in it and put it in for the last time. I always save my old shims in case I need them for another project. There's no step in this where the seal goes. I got it back in a little bit farther than whoever was in here last, because the outer lip was just on the edge of the taper. Got some grease on the lip as usual. And just looking around there to, looks like it went on good. No reason it shouldn't. Now, well, everything's still in order. Maybe get the bolt hole a little closer. Now it decides to go on hard. Try to get some grease on this outside O-ring. Yep, it started good. Excellent. Just snug her up the rest of the way. No signs of the seal rolling. I am happy. Earlier when I was running it to circulate the diesel fuel in there to flush things out, I thought it looked like this top shaft was wiggling around a little bit. That took care of it. I checked the bottom, or I'm sorry, the counter shaft for end play, and no sign of wiggling there. Stick a bar down in here and push against it. I just hear slightest amount of a movement. So we are going to call that one good. But if that one did need it, there are shims under this cover plate right here. And I checked the pinion shaft for looseness when I had the transfer case off, so I think the transmission is good, other than a little more flushing out, and can start putting these other parts back on and cover it up, close it up. As always, I appreciate everyone watching, and we will see you in the next one.